Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jessica Smith and I help you simplify home education so you can work wonders in your home. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about my family's motor lab and the couple of books that I mentioned in my plan for this school year and go more into depth on them and why I started using these books and putting a motor lab in our home. Well, all started almost a year ago. Actually, it started a lot longer ago. I have a son who has struggled with ADD and just some behavioral issues, also wetting the bed. No matter what we've done, restricting liquids, we've done lots of other things. We've had his adenoids and tonsils taken out because of some mild sleep apnea, all kinds of things to try to help with the bedwetting as well as ADHD. And nothing really was helping. Then more and more research, talking to other moms, figured out that there is something called primitive reflexes. Now, my background is in child development. That's what I got my 4-year Bachelor's of Science in. Not once were these primitive reflexes mentioned as having to be integrated. I learned that infants have reflexes and I learned what they were. I didn't learn that they had to be integrated through stimulation and use before they could mature and develop cognitively. So the brainstem is where most infants operate from. Their reflexes. They don't have a lot of control over it. This is important for their survival. But as they learn and they grow and they develop, they grow from the bottom up and from the inside out. Well, in order for that to really fully happen, those primitive reflexes need to be integrated. Some of those primitive reflexes are when the hand is touched. There's an instinct to close over it. When the mouth is touched or the lips, then there's an instinct to root and suck. There's an instinct or a primitive reflex for the feet when they're touched. There's a primitive reflex on the back. So there's one where the back is, if the lower back's touched, then they turn. And that is an important thing for when babies are being born. Their lower back needs to, when it's touched, they need to turn and get into an ideal position for birth. So many reflexes. I can link to some of my favorite YouTube channels for occupational therapists that show you all of these reflexes and how to test to see if your child has any retained reflexes. They also show you exercises and activities for you to do with your children to help them integrate those. So there's these reflexes. Now, if your child is not contained in strollers and car seats and swings and bouncers too much, they'll have lots of opportunities to integrate those. Now, I didn't use many of these and my boys still had some retained reflexes. So it's just something to be aware of. It's not your fault if your children have retained reflexes, but it is a good idea to make sure that they have lots of unstructured playtime on the floor, not in a sensory deprivation device, because it deprives them of sensory and gross motor development. So that is just a background info of what that is. So I found out that my children had some retained reflexes. And so I did a lot of research into what I needed to do. That's how I found the YouTube videos and channels about it. And I did these exercises. And after 2 months, from December, January, and February, my son, who was 8 at the time, went from wetting the bed randomly a few times a month to not wetting the bed at all for 6 months. My 6-year-old, who would chew off the erasers of all of our pencils. I am not exaggerating when I said we could not find a pencil in the house with an eraser, and chewing holes in his shirts. He went from that to not chewing anything. We have pencils in our house with erasers, all from just doing the stimulation to help integrate those. I've also noticed a big difference in behavior that seemed totally unrelated to these primitive reflexes. So their brain which was just kind of operating sporadically in the brainstem, and there wasn't a lot of executive function going on because he was kind of stuck in immature functioning in that brainstem and the limbic system. He wasn't getting full functioning to the outer frontal lobes, which include remembering things, being able to self-regulate, to plan, and to execute plans. Those are all in that frontal, prefrontal cortex. And so I've noticed a big difference in his maturity and development since doing those. That all being said, I wanted more activities. I wanted more things to help him than just those primitive reflexes. Well, ask and you shall receive. Things just happen to work out wonderfully. These little tender mercies happen all the time. So in May, I went to a homeschool conference that I was asked to speak at one in Nevada. And another speaker there, Sydney Armstrong, who has her master's in special ed and is the founder of a nonprofit to help kids with learning disabilities, spoke about how we as homeschool moms, kind of things that we can do to help our kids help their brains function at optimum level and mature so that they're operating out of the prefrontal cortex. So these are the books that she recommended. This one is When Bright Kids Can't Learn. This book is all about brain research that's been done and simple exercises that you can do at home. This one is called Ready Bodies, Learning Minds. This is by a physical therapist. She wrote this for schools to create motor labs or play breaks in between breaks or classes so that teachers have something, some more direction and activities to do. So I'm going to show you what these look like, and then I'll show you what our home lab looks like, take you on a little tour of how I've set it up. Now I'm only a few weeks into the school year, so I'm sure things will change, but I'm going to show you what I've set up so far, what that looks like, as well as what these books look like on the inside. So let's talk about some books that have really shaped my view on the mind and body connection and why it is so important for kids to move their bodies from infancy all the way up to school age, and why that movement is so integral, essential for being able to learn and read and do math later on. So here are a few books. One is School Can Wait. The author, Raymond C. Moore, he has his PhD, and I think it's developmental psychology. It might be education. Anyway, he talks about all the studies that him and the people in his foundation go over, and you can see I've read through it and put down tons of notes. This is all studies that have replicable studies. He went through 5,000 different studies on the things that children need to, or the different skills that need to be in place before they start school, and at what age school should be started, which is around 7 to 10 years old, 7 at the very earliest, ideally 8 or 9. So the reason is that children's eyes need to move in unison. Let's just pretend these are my eyes. They need to move in unison. Now, if you're reading from the left to the right of a page, this eye is going to be reading till you reach the midline, and then it's going to transfer. This one is going to be the dominant eye. So the child needs to be able to move in unison simultaneously. And if not, if the muscles around this eye are not strong, and this one's stronger, or vice versa, they're going to be reading, and then if they don't catch what's over here, they're going to miss the words that are on this half. Or if they don't have a good connection between the two sides of the brain, then they're going to miss a lot of the words in the middle of the page when that transfer happens. The other thing is that the eyes need to be able to track, be able to move from one line down to the very next and follow those words and those small lines. And all of that comes from running and the eyes moving up and down as we run and being able to hold still. There's like the vestibular system, the proprioceptive system, all of those things they need to be strong and in place and mature before they can read. Now, this book Ready Bodies, Learning Minds goes into much more detail. This book is for teachers and educators in schools. This gives them a foundation. Let me get to the table of contents. Just talks about development. Now, I love her idea on development, that it is unwrapped, because develop means to de-envelop. So instead of building up, you are unwrapping, de-enveloping what is in the child. And I love that view of development. It's very in line with Charlotte Mason's idea that children are born persons. So she goes over the tactile system and all the things that go on with that. And then she talks about the primitive reflexes, talks about what's going on in the body, the physical body, and then how that affects learning. So she goes through all of those systems, then common concerns, and then she talks about how to create a motor lab in a school setting, mind you, so a school setting, and then goes through all of the exercises for that. So I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. She has a material list, then standard activities. And you start with the key activities. And we have this in our house, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we have some mats down, and the boys do key activities. These, from what I have researched and I've read a lot about, these are not static, but moving exercises for them to integrate those primitive reflexes. It also helps strengthen core muscles, which is really important for kids. If they're sitting down, they need to have those strong core muscles to keep them up so they don't have to think about it while they're writing and reading. If they have poor core muscle tone, then they're not going to be able to sit up, and they're not going to be able to focus on the task at hand because they're so weak. So those are what the key activities are for. Then you start with T1, B1, and P1. The A, B, and C, those are for preschool. So if you have preschool age kids, this is the most important thing they can be doing right now, is to be integrating these reflexes, to be strengthening their gross motor and fine motor skills, and then their vestibular, their proprioceptive, building strong muscles so that they can learn when they start school at 6 or 7 years old. So you want to start with the first ones if you're preschool age kids. And if you have older kids, then you can start at activity 1. Now, if your preschooler is pretty advanced and they've moved past these, they can begin doing these ones, the pre-K approved ones. Okay, so these are activities that you set up in your motor lab. And it might look like this. Here's your room. You have the key activities, and then around it, you have a station for the different systems, so proprioceptive, etc. And your classroom is going to go around you. They don't have to all be at each one. You could have 1 or 2 kids at each station, and that's how we do it in my house. We all do the key activities together, and then they split up and they begin doing on their own. They just go around and do all of these activities until they're done. You ideally only spend 2, maybe 3 minutes at each activity. And so the whole thing should take 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. And that is our play break in between school lessons. Now, in the past, we've done this after family morning time or our family gather. So we spend 45 minutes-ish doing family gather, and then we do a play break, which is this, and then we go into our individual learning time. So this is the Ready Bodies, Learning Minds. I was not able to find it a good price used. It was hard to find used, and when I did find it, it was more expensive than new. So I bought this. This was $72 from the website. Now, I feel like it was worth it. I really do. If I'm going to pay $100 or more for a math curriculum, this is kind of laying the foundation for those math skills. Or if I'm spending that much money on a reading or writing program, I see no problem spending that much money for a curriculum or a program that is going to strengthen my child's body and mind, kind of creating good soil for everything else to grow in. This book is a lot cheaper. It's about $9 to $15 used. And this is all about brain research that has been done that will help children with learning disabilities. Now, I assessed my son on all of these, and he really only had a few things that he needed to work on, mainly for attention. So if your child is struggling with pretty serious learning disability, dyslexia or dyscalculia, even attention, just not being able to read, these are very helpful. Now, I talked a little bit about the eyes. I'm going to share a story a friend just shared with me. Her son has had a really hard time reading. He can read, but he can't at the same time. He is in the upper elementary or middle school age, and he hasn't been able to read a chapter book yet. Now, he can decode words. She's taught him how to read. Now, she just wrote me and said that they figured out that his left eye, and the muscles around his eye are very weak. And so his left eye is not tracking and following like his right eye is. And so he will cover his eye when he's reading. He will rub it. It'll get tired. He'll get a headache. He needs glasses, but the glasses aren't helping. And so she is working with a tutor to help strengthen those eye muscles. So this has some exercises for that. There's also a book that I could not find for this video. It is called Disconnected Kids. That one also has eye exercises. For example, this is the child. You have the pencil about 3 feet away, and then you slowly move it. It's right in between their two eyes, right where their nose is, and they follow it. And then they tell you when they start to see 2 of the pencil, and you keep doing that, and they just follow it, and that is help strengthening their eyes. There's these exercises as well. What I think is so interesting is what may be considered a learning disability like dyslexia may actually be physical weaknesses like eye tracking and eye movement. So these exercises are to help that. There are motor control exercises. Now, I have marked things that are parallel to Charlotte Mason's method and what she did or what she taught in her schools. So Swedish drill, a lot of the exercises in here have a lot to do with Swedish drill. That she had her students do it. She noticed an improvement in their ability to learn. Then there's some other exercises like touching and throwing and being able to move your body and say what you're doing at the same time. There's visual. So there's just concentration game, just things that you should play with your preschooler. I think that's really cool too. Things that we're like, oh, we want them to do worksheets. We want them to do more abstract, hard, difficult things. But really, you need to do the simple, basic things before you move on to those. And the concentration, old maid type stuff is one of those. Picture study. Looking at a picture and then having them close their eyes and then describe the picture, or having them look at the picture, turn it over and ask them 2 or 3 questions about it. That's something that you do anyway when you're doing picture study. Charlotte Mason's spelling lessons, where you look at a word and you either break it up, you memorize what it looks like in your mind, you close your eyes, and then you say the letters out loud as you see them in your mind. Charlotte Mason had children do that for their spelling lessons. And so that's something, again, that if your child's doing Charlotte Mason's method, they're actually doing brain exercises that it has been proven to be effective by research. This exercise is actually in Ready Bodies, Learning Minds for the eye, feet, and hands, or eyes, hands, and feet. And then sentence repeat. You are reading some sentences or even just words, and then your child repeats them. This is dictation. This is recitation that I have been doing with my kids in Family Gather since they could speak. Then digit repeat. This is a little different, but also very similar to Charlotte Mason's math curriculum. So Charlotte Mason Elementary Arithmetic. There's some exercises, some activities that are very much like this, where children need to learn how to keep numbers in their mind in increasing difficulty. And then there's just a lot of these like peripheral charts. That's for vision, being able to strengthen the peripheral, the ability for the eyes to see things in the peripheral vision. And I have made all these charts for my kids in a Google Doc. Everything that needs to be printed or blown up in this book I have made, and I'll have that in Patreon. So if you're a Patreon member, look out for that. If you're interested in becoming a member and just getting all these extras, it's only $5 a month, and I will have the link in the description box. I'm also thinking of putting videos up for both of these books in Patreon or maybe on YouTube. I'll see how much time I have, but I think it would be really helpful to see these exercises done with a real student. Again, this is some Swedish drill. And then ball bouncing. There's a lot of exercises for balls and activities in this book. So there's a lot of intersect between these. And I have gone through and found those intersections and made a list of activities to do for each month for my boys. And I think I'll just put those on Patreon as well to make things easier for you other mamas. These are the exercises. That is what the book looks like. Lots of activities you can do to just strengthen your brain and get your kids' bodies and minds forming a relationship together. I think that's really cool with Charlotte Mason's idea of education is an atmosphere and forming a relationship with the world around them, with others, which includes themselves. So if your child is not learning as well or catching on as well as you think they should, it may be they did not have enough time in the early years to form a relationship with themselves, with their bodies, their mind and body, forming a relationship or even forming a relationship with the world around them, with their proprioceptive and vestibular. So important. It's foundational for them to be able to learn. And these books are so helpful in giving you ideas of how to present things for your child, or opportunities and experiences for them to form that relationship with the world around them and with themselves. So this is our motor lab. It is in our basement. So we have a huge basement room that is just dedicated to play and getting energy out in the middle of our lessons. So we have, this room is just play, build forts, go wild, and that's why there's, the paint and everything has been scratched off. But it makes a great place for motor lab. So I have different stations here based on the different systems that we exercise in the motor lab. So there's ball work, locomotor, proprioceptive, has the trampoline there, motor skills, and then vestibular. And then on the other side here, I have eye, hand, foot, balance, and tactile. And this is just the cabinet where I keep all of the supplies that we would need, mostly for eye, hand, foot, but also for other activities that they will use in the future or have passed and don't need them anymore. And then in the middle of the room, I have mats for the key activities to integrate primitive reflexes. Now, I started to set it up by having the boys all just do the first exercise of every system. But quickly realized that my older boys were way past these first activities. And so I had them do them for a week, and then I would just kind of assess them, have them do these things until I found where there was that sweet spot where it was a little difficult. And so now I'm making them their individual lists. So I'll have their name, and then I'll have key activities, and then I'll have T and whatever number that they are on. So for my oldest, he is working on jump roping. That's pretty difficult for him. But for my youngest, doing the trampoline, or for my middle son, doing the hoop jump, are easy or somewhat challenging, but not too frustrating. So they're doing those. So that is how I have found to set it up, is just assess the boys at the beginning of the year to figure out where to start them, which activities are going to be that sweet spot, and then giving them a list. And I have that here so that they can come down when they have their 20-30 minute play break to do their motor lab. Now, my 2 younger ones need some more directions, so we do the motor lab together, and they do the key activities here in the center, and then they can just pick one of these to go and start doing, and then they can come check it off, or just make a little mark to know that they've done it, and then just move on to something else. Otherwise, having all the boys try to do the same activity, it just clogs it up, takes more time. And then I have some other random things here, like this bar and then the climbing wall. And so when they are done, if they do it timely and don't mess around, which doesn't usually happen, but if they do that, then they can play on this wall and climb. They can hang and climb on there. And we also have, hanging up here, this wonderful sensory swing. It's huge. Let's see if I can scoot back far enough. You can see how big this is. It is a big swing. They can fit 2 kids in it, and they're cocooned in it, and it is a great sensory activity for them to do as well. So that's just something they can do when they are done with their activities.